Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FBC Radio Live. It's August 30th, 2023. And, again, we're just getting closer and closer to the NFL season, John. We had Cutdown Day yesterday. It used to be gradually over the course of the preseason and whatnot, we'd have different numbers of players that teams had to get down to each week. Now it's, well, you basically just have to get down to 53 by yesterday, and that's what teams did. Some surprise moves. We're going to talk about Jonathan Taylor here in a minute, who obviously did not get moved, and to the dismay of fantasy football owners out there, he is now going to spend at least the first 4 weeks on the PUP list. But John, we'll start New England, because obviously interesting, and we both have our interests with that team, of course. I know you're interested in the Jets too because of Aaron Rodgers. Okay, don't worry, I'm going to mention him. But the Patriots made it very clear. And look, I'm gonna recall a conversation that we had last season. Probably around the time that Zappy fever took over, and I'm saying that with all sarcasm implied. We said at the time, and I think you asked the question, or the question was out there. I don't want to say it was your question, because I don't want to make it seem like you were encouraging the move, but it was like, is Bailey Zappi any threat to Mac Jones? And it was like, no, not at all. And I thought last year, and I felt the same way. It was just like, okay, he came in and played nice for 2 games. Nothing too complicated. Came in, did some nice things, but the reaction to him and the vitriol towards Mac Jones at the time, and it was kind of at its, I'm not going to use I was going to say fever pitch, but I feel like I've already hit my limit of sports cliches already, and we're about 90 seconds into the show. But the point is that the fever pitch of the angst against Mac Jones, I think that was the fever pitch of it. That time, Bailey Zappi comes in, that home game where the crowd was cheering, and it was kind of ridiculous, but hey, it is what it is. Anyways, he gets cut. They're going to try, I'm assuming, to get him on the practice squad. But let's make it very clear. This was a very definitive statement that Mac Jones is the guy, and it didn't have to be made, John. Let's be clear. It probably didn't have to be made, but there's a certain contingent of media members down in Foxborough that insist that Bill Belichick say explicitly pretty much every time he gets up at the podium that Mac Jones is his starter, because if he doesn't, apparently that means he's not. But no, this move was very made it very clear that, yes, Mac Jones is the starter of this team, and there is a significant gap between him and Bailey Zappi. It doesn't mean that Zappi couldn't have had some moments as a backup, but that's what he was. And clearly, John, this was the best part, and I'll let you chime in here in a minute, but the best part about all this was, for weeks, we've heard comments about him having a poor preseason. And then there was surprise, quote unquote, shock that he was actually cut. Like, isn't that what's supposed to happen? If you don't perform, like, you're not going to earn a job, John?
Oftentimes, yes, other than the fact that he was considered the backup quarterback. So right now they have one quarterback, and they're going to try to bring Zappi back on the practice squad. We'll see what happens with Malik Cunningham. Maybe they sign a veteran free agent, Colt McCoy's name has come up, which that kind of makes some sense, right?
There's a veteran out there. You know what? I'm not even going to go there.
Don't go there.
I'm not.
Go there. No, don't. He's not going to be the backup if he shows up. So that could make some sense, right? And I always felt that if you have a young quarterback, it's probably best to have a veteran behind him. I don't think it makes sense. Like last year, Mac Jones in his second year, Bailey Zappi as a rookie, they're both kind of competing against each other, which, can be interesting to say the least, but sometimes it puts too much pressure on the incumbent quarterback. And look, last year was difficult. They had Matt Patricia as the offensive coordinator, Joe Judge as the quarterback coach. Mac regressed without question. And I maintained throughout all of last season that Bailey Zappi's name made him more popular than he should have been. I mean, it's kind of a catchy tune. Zappy. Yeah, Zappy fever. I mean, Mac Jones is, kind of a very milquetoast type name, right? Bailey Zappi. Wow, that sounds pretty cool. And I think that was one of the reasons people would go to the stadium and cheer for him. Zappy. That's a pretty cool name. So I think that was part of it. But we'll see if he clears waivers and comes back for the practice squad.
It's kind of sad, but it's the truth, John. I mean, it is. I mean, think about it. If you have a catchy name, like you already have credibility amongst football fans.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. Remember Barkevius Mingo? Like,
yep.
Oh my God, the name, or like any one of these names that sounds like they're, there's so many of them out there. I wish I could come up with many more examples right off the top of my head, but it's true though. I mean, the catchiness of the name, it was cool, it was hip, So yeah, I mean, look. I mean, I think there's no doubt that Mac Jones has to perform. I think he's in compared to last season a far better situation in a number of ways. Obviously, the offensive coordinator situation, but I think the players around him too. There seems to be a recommitment to Kendrick Bourne and his. I think the limited usage last year, a lot of it was tied to disagreements he had with the previous offensive coordinator, and obviously we see on film when he's out there, it seems like he makes a difference, and he has a little different flair to him. Does that make sense? Like, he feels like he can make plays for this team if given the opportunity, and I think the Patriots, and if you believe the reports about teams seeking him out for a trade and them denying it, I think they've recommitted to him being a focal point moving forward. You have that. You have Juju Smith-Schuster. You have these other players that I think are talented, and you have a pretty decent backfield with Ramondre Stevenson and now Ezekiel Elliott. So the pressure is on Mac Jones, and there's no doubt about it that he has to perform. But that can be true the same way that Mac Jones was very clearly the better quarterback, and it was very clearly his team. Like this whole narrative now that's circulating that, again, kind of off the comments that I was making, that people are now saying, oh, now Belichick's commit. No. He's been the quarterback. Just because you've wanted to create a quarterback controversy because, well, it's far easier to opine about, doesn't mean that at any point there was any sort of doubt in who Mac Jones is. Now, again, that doesn't mean that his job is secure for the next 15 years. No, he has to go out and perform this year. This is going to be a huge year for him. And we can have a conversation next offseason if he regresses again or things don't change. But for now, and as it has been the last 3 seasons when they decided to cut Cam Newton, it's Mac Jones's team, and it's always been Mac Jones's team.
Yeah, I mean, because when you look back to that Chicago game, which, by the way, was the last victory the Bears had last season, they were 3-4 after that game, and then managed to lose their final 10 games. They looked like a juggernaut that night. Justin Fields looked like Lamar Jackson, just running wild on the New England Patriots, and the Patriots struggled. But after that game, they went back to Mac Jones, and Mac Jones never came out. He finished the season as the starting quarterback. I mean, if there'd been some doubt there, then maybe they would have put Bailey Zappi back in. I think maybe they just wanted to try to build up Mac Jones' confidence, but it was just a difficult situation with who was coaching offense and who was coaching quarterback. You kind of button that up now with Billy O'Brien. Adrian Clem is a fine offensive line coach. That, to me, is still the biggest question mark on this team is the offensive line. Who's going to be healthy? Who's going to be available on opening day? Because you're going up against a team in the Philadelphia Eagles who had the best pass rush in football last year. So that could be a real problem on opening day if you can't protect Mac Jones.
Yeah, and obviously, I think you can sit there, and once you get past the again, people were making these comments yesterday. It's like the offensive line. Yes, it has been a key issue, but the problem is a lot of people focus on, again, the silly quarterback controversy and things like weapons with the Z, John, which implies that I'm being very sarcastic and just kind of mocking it a little bit, because it is. It's we see it every single season, and I think if you're I can't speak to every city's or every region's coverage of their particular teams, but it's a lot of negative, and it's a lot of headline grabbing discussions, meaning there's really not a lot of substance. So you spend the entire offseason talking about wide receivers and running backs and if you really wanted Ezekiel Elliott, why did you not sign him 2 weeks earlier? And why did you sign the guy from the CFL? It's just stupid, silly debate style topics, not necessarily analytical. And I think a lot of fans want analytical. They want not necessarily rosy, positive things. And I saw this someone's response to some criticism yesterday, John, and I won't name names. Okay. I'm not going to name names here, but their response was, I'm not paid to be a cheerleader. Well, you're also not paid to be negative every single time. That's not, I mean, it's the same thing, just on the other end of the spectrum. Like, I think people want like honest, genuine commentary, not this like drama inducing, like stupid, silly, trying to one up Bill Belichick mind game. Like, you're going to ask Bill Belichick the same stupid question every single time you get up to the podium. Well, guess what? You're going to get the same non-answer every single time. And why would Bill Belichick give you anything otherwise? And why, on top of that, would he give you anything to begin with? Like I the other day, the cuts that they still had to make. He didn't reveal anything at the press conference, but shortly after he got off the podium, a lot of moves came down, and there was, again, some griping from media members saying, well, why didn't he give it to us then? Well, guess what? He doesn't owe you anything. And I think fans in general, John, are kind of really getting sick and tired of this entitlement when it comes to covering football, when the coverage that those people are giving is not genuine. And it's kind of insulting to the fan base. So we see this in New England, and I'm speaking about it as a New England Patriots fan. I'm sure there's similar things going on in other places, but I can say pretty confidently that this is not what it's like everywhere. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think the broad coverage of sports is definitely headline driven. It's not really substance driven. But I think the overly focused attention on negative, and not just negative, John, but just fabricated storylines. Like, it's become such a norm that, I mean, what kind, what's good coverage for football now? Well, it depends on who you ask.
Well, I mean, I think you also have to look at it that this franchise was at such a high level for 19 years.
Sure.
Averaging 12 and a half wins and going to the conference championship game 70% of the time and all of that. In the last 3 years, the 25 and 26. I'm not saying they're an afterthought, but they're kind of a mediocre football team the last 3 years. So now there's more questions, right? Like roster construction, those types of things. So I think those are questions that even the fans want to know, like, how have you constructed your wide receiver room? Is it going to be good enough? Does Mac Jones need more help? You look at other quarterbacks that Mac Jones was with Alabama, and, you've got, obviously, Tua has two exceptional wide receivers in Miami, and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and Devontae Smith and Philadelphia, along with
A.J. Brown.
A.J. Brown, yes. I always mess him up with DK Metcalf, huge receivers. But that obviously, Jalen Hurts has great wide receivers. And the group that the Patriots have, it seems like kind of a middling group, right? I mean, guys that are second and third receivers, not necessarily lead receivers. Is that good enough? Well, it was with Tom Brady for 19 years, but that's Tom Brady. It's a little bit different with Mac Jones. So I think those are serious questions. And again, I just keep going back to the offensive line, because you can have all the weapons you want, the quarterback and everything else. If that's an issue, then that's something they're going to have to address.
No, and that's and that kind of brings me back to my point, was like, that's always been an issue, and anyone paying attention realizes that was probably the most important storyline or topic that should have been discussed, outside of obviously the impact that Bill O'Brien can have on Matt. I mean, again, outside of the quarterback discussion, in terms of not the quarterback quote unquote competition, but the just Mac Jones in general. Outside of that, the biggest question should have been the offensive line, not, again, weapons or drama or this or that. And again, that's what I'm getting at. There's those are good questions. I mean, the roster construction is great. And like Bill Belichick gave a great answer to the whole cap spending thing, which is completely, I mean, again, if you cover the NFL for a prominent news organization, whether it's paper, whether it's print, digital, audio, visual, doesn't matter. You're expected to have at least a basic understanding of how, I understand salary cap, like deep understanding of the salary cap takes a very smart mind. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I understand the intricacies. There are very smart people out there that do, but you can understand the basic framework of how the cap works. And very simply and very appropriately, people pointed out the mistake in saying that the Patriots, why don't this Patriots spend? Well, Belichick does spend. He spends to the cap, and that's the thing. People see these big dollar contracts, not even thinking about how a lot of these contracts don't pay out at all, John. I mean, that's the thing. Like, people will look at these and sit there and think they're all slam dunks, so when 90% of them don't live up to the hype of the contract, and hell, I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a good amount of them that are absolutely disastrous. So this idea of having to spend a lot of money, well, look at what the Rams, well, guess what? The Rams are in a whole hell of a lot more trouble than the Patriots have ever been. I mean, yeah, they've had a mediocre 3 seasons, but relative to how we see other teams completely fall apart after championship runs, the Patriots have done relatively well. And I mean, can we judge it down the line when Belichick's gone and we've come and seen the Mac Jones era? Sure, why not? But like right now, who do you think's in a better situation, the Patriots or the Rams? Mind you, the Rams tried to trade Matt Stafford because his contract is so just astronomically out of whack, the cap number, the next couple of years. And guess what, John? They couldn't. They couldn't trade him. So what are they going to do? Well, guess what? I'd be surprised if they won 4 games this year, because they're old, they have some talent, and expectations probably far exceeding what they can actually do, because they're the LA Rams and they just won a Super Bowl. But the reality of it is they're far, far, far from being that team, because, well, guess what? You spend recklessly, eventually you're going to have to pay the bill. And fortunately for the Rams, they at least got 1 Super Bowl out of it. But it's not going to lead to a second, and it's certainly not going to lead to any sort of sustained success. And that's what's kind of funny when people point to teams like the Rams, who are like, oh, look at how the Rams spend and see that work. No, it doesn't work. And what Belichick's point is if you're looking for sustained long-term success, which has always been, regardless of whether or not Tom Brady's here or not. Now, again, it's a lot easier when Brady's here, obviously, but if you're looking for long, sustained success, you just don't be reckless like that. And you know what? Like, who knows if it's going to lead to another Super Bowl? We're going to find out. But I think relative to what we're seeing some of these other teams, I think the Patriots are in a pretty good situation with a pretty, I'd say, pretty high ceiling. I'm not going to say they're going to reach it, but I think the potential for this team is, I don't think it's that limited. Like, I think last year, I think we went into the year thinking, like, even if they kind of overachieve a bit, I don't think the ceiling's too high. Like, they could certainly overachieve this season. You know what I mean? And kind of surprise some people, because I do think that, like, if the Billy O'Brien move works out, and I do like the offensive players around him, and if you get better than expected play from the offensive line, you could have a pretty effective offense in this league. And I think the defense is still pretty solid. So that could be enough to win a few more games than expected. So there's certainly optimism, and I think rightfully so, but also plenty of question marks.
Oh yeah, especially now that the division is probably stronger than it's been in a very long time. On paper, yeah. I mean, the Jets in Miami do have a tendency of screwing things up.
I'll be honest, it's kind of amazing that people are just taking Tua as an elite quarterback at face value. I feel like that's been kind of washed over a little bit, where it's like they just expect to go out there and be a top 10 quarterback. I mean,
yeah, I would say he's slightly outside of that, even at his best.
Yeah.
I mean, I can name 10 quarterbacks that I would.
I don't think that's good enough to win in this league. So how serious do you take Miami? Well, they could disrupt some things. They can certainly make a few highlights, but are they just the Chargers with a worse quarterback in a better injury luck situation?
Right, yeah. I would clearly take Justin Herbert over too, even though Herbert at times is disappointed, but you can just tell the raw natural skills and actually the numbers he's put up are pretty exceptional. I've made the case now that the NFC North may be stronger than the AFC East. Because you have two teams that look like they could be Super Bowl contenders in Cincinnati and Baltimore. Pittsburgh finished the season really strong, and if their offense grows with that defense, they can be a really tough out. And Cleveland has a lot of talent. If the quarterback, Deshaun Watson, plays closer to what he did in Houston, I think you have another good team there. Those two divisions, to me, look like the two best divisions in football. But, yeah, there's question marks all over the place. Mm-hmm. Every team in football has, question marks. Because you can't just construct perfect rosters anymore because of the salary cap. You can't go out and have the best offensive line and the best defensive line and the best quarterback. You can't just afford all of that stuff. So you have to make good with what you can. But I think, again, I sound like a broken record. If the offensive line is buttoned up, I think this offense can be good.
Yeah, and look,
will be really good, and you go from there.
Look, it's an offensive driven league, and I think they have talented players. They have some nice players. I'm interested to see what, Ezekiel Elliott looks like with this team. He's not the guy who went out in his rookie season and got 1,600 yards, but I think he scored, what, was it 9, 10, 11 touchdowns last year? I think it was.
Yeah, double digits.
Yeah, double digits. Yeah, maybe 12. Yeah.
Yards.
So.
Yeah.
So
goal line guy, red zone.
Which, and again, I mean, the Patriots utilize goal line running quite a bit, and they have even during the Tom Brady era. I mean, that's one of the things in Brady's positives when you want to get into some of these nitpicking quarterback arguments is that he sacrificed quite a lot of personal touchdowns that other quarterbacks didn't, because the Patriots like to run the ball and certainly down by the goal line. So speaking of running the ball, the Jonathan Taylor drama is just continuing to be just that, and that's drama. And that's, well, he was supposed to be traded, but he had a deadline to find a suitable trade partner. That came and went. And now the Colts are they're putting him on the PUP list, which means he's going to be out for the first 4 weeks of the season. And, I would assume that during that time, maybe they revisit trade discussions with another team before the trade deadline. I think it's actually on Halloween this year. But, at the end of the day, I mean, this is just, talk about just a bad situation in Indy. I mean, this is a team that pun intended was, well, maybe it wasn't so much luck as it was, you make your own luck to get Andrew Luck. But this team has just, I feel like it's gotten in its way more often than not since Peyton Manning departed. And even that situation, if you remember, wasn't this like nice, tidy, okay, thanks for your time. I know people, the drama, quote unquote, I'm using my quotation marks again. The drama, excuse me, around Brady's departure from the Patriots was nothing compared to what happened with Peyton Manning. I mean, literally, I think that the Patriots Brady stuff was quite overblown, but there was a pretty public, kind of, I wouldn't say overtly public, but there's some subtle stabs back and forth between Peyton Manning and the Colts organization, and I think it ultimately led to his departure. And I don't know about you, maybe this is just perception, John, but I feel like he almost represents the Broncos more publicly than he does the Colts. Does that make sense?
I think it does. Yeah, absolutely. And he was only there 4 years, went to 2 Super Bowls, won one. I know he still has some business ties in Colorado. He probably has business ties in Indianapolis.
John's, right?
He's got quite the portfolio without question. But I would guess that if he was to become president of football operations of an organization, it might be more likely Denver than Indianapolis, because I think Denver has more stable ownership and, obviously more money, but also the thing that might hold it back is Sean Payton is kind of in charge of what's going
right.
in Denver. So, maybe that's down the road or, wherever else Peyton Manning wants to go. Maybe he just likes doing what he does now, which it seems like he's having a blast doing it. But, I think you nailed it, Ian. You look at the Colts, their success is tied to, I'll say, 1.5 players. Certainly Peyton Manning from 1998 to 2010. I mean, he elevated them every single year. And then, of course, they, in 2011, tanked and got Andrew Luck, and he made them relevant for, 5-6 years, not certainly at the level of Peyton Manning. To me, Peyton Manning, I'm not going to put him up there with Michael Jordan, but he's as big a reason that the Colts had any success, not quite as much as Michael Jordan, but it's tied to one guy, right? And obviously, you can make that same case for Tom Brady with the Patriots, but at least before Brady got here, the Patriots had gone to 2 Super Bowls in the previous 15 years. They were somewhat of a contending team, with Parcells, and before that, they, went to the Super Bowl against the Bears. Not great results, but the Colts, what are the Colts without Peyton Manning? It's like he's the reason they were relevant for 13, 14 years. And so that shows you that ownership's not that great. They just got lucky with Peyton Manning.
Yeah, and look, I mean, watching this unfold with Jonathan Taylor now, and I mean, I it's probably an error on my part, but I'm going to say I can't come up with a specific example, but I know, I feel like there has been some other, I don't know, public negotiation issues with this franchise, and you please cite an example if you can think of one off the top of your head, because I'm drawing a blank here. But I feel like this isn't the only time that there's, because look, we know Jim Irsay is a very eccentric guy. You know what I mean? He goes about things his own way. He's had some very public issues, so I'm not saying anything that's not public knowledge. So there's been some drama around it, and I think sometimes you look at this organization and you can kind of see how it can be a little unstable. And now you're talking about a 26-year-old running back who was really the lifeblood of your offense in the last couple of years, especially considering the living dead crop of quarterbacks they've gone through the last couple of years. I mean, no offense to Matt Ryan and Phillip Rivers, but it was Matt Ryan and Phillip Rivers in their mid to late 30s. Let's be honest here. It wasn't that good. So it's going to be interesting to see how this completely unfolds. And for a team that's trying to not only forge a new identity, I mean, they have a new rookie quarterback. I mean, you're introducing him to a team where, like, if you have a rookie quarterback, you want to, first of all, take advantage of his contract and build the team around him to succeed right away. And one of the best things you can do, especially for a guy who's as athletic and has the ability to run like Anthony Richardson, is pair him with a very extremely talented running back. And now you're looking like it's probably not. It looks likely that they're not going to take a snap together, and that's too bad for Richardson. But again, you can kind of look at the Colts organization and not be too surprised. And then you think about it and you're like, well, it's not that surprising that they probably didn't win more Super Bowls even with Peyton Manning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they like to talk about, we've got the 4th highest winning percentage in the AFC the last 25 years behind the Patriots, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore. But again, most of that is tied into Peyton Manning. Since he's left, yeah, they had 3 straight 11-win seasons with Andrew Luck, and they were kind of a pain in the butt that sometimes some teams in the playoffs, but
not for the Patriots.
Really never a Super Bowl. No, the Patriots love playing them.
I mean, loved watching them play the Colts.
It was 40 points
easy,
minimum,
guaranteed every time. 45 to 10. I mean, it was just like clockwork.
Yeah.
It was the same thing over and over again against those Colts teams.
They would run on them. Then Brady would use play action, and then Andrew Luck would throw some interceptions because they got behind, and he would force the ball. So those were easy wins for the Patriots. But it was, again, most of the success of the Colts over the last 25 years is directly tied to Peyton Manning. So you have to try to, if you're trying to build an organization, do more than that. You said it perfectly. In Anthony Richardson, very young raw quarterback, have him have a very good running back next to him to take pressure off him, so you have some balance on offense. Supposedly they have a good offensive line, so go from there. And now they don't have one of the best running backs in football, who's still very young and still very productive. It's not a situation like Zeke Elliott, who's 28, 29 years old, a lot of mileage on him. This guy is 24 years old. He's still right there in his prime. And, it's just, it makes no sense. If you don't want him, trade him. Move on.
Well,
move on.
and I think
you get for him? Maybe a second round pick, maybe a third round pick, because that's what the market bears right now for running back.
Well, and I think it's also telling that, that he wants out as much as he does, and that again kind of speaks to the whole organization and everything like that. So, it's gonna, like I said, it's gonna, certainly be something to keep an eye on, between now and October, if that's how long it takes. We'll see, but hey, at least you're not the 49ers, right? And I mean, look, if Brock Purdy does not work, whew, man, has an organization fumbled the bag, so to speak, more than the 49ers in the last decade? I mean, this was a team, John, that had at one point still does have a really, really good defense. And I took them in my fantasy league, so I'm counting on it. They still have a really, really good team with a question mark at the most important position. And I don't, again, yes, Brock Purdy is a question mark. I don't care what 7 game, I do care. Obviously, that gives you some sort of foundation to build on. But I'm not sitting and saying oh, that's enough for me to say, yeah, he's certainly going to work out. I have no idea, John. No clue. And if they don't work, if it doesn't work out, I hate doing this revisionist history as much as anyone, especially when it comes to drafting, because that's an easy tool to stoke up criticism. But when you give up as much as you did to move up into the draft, to take a quarterback, and not just take a quarterback, but forego taking several other quarterbacks in that draft and other very effective players to draft a kid that, showed you nothing. That's a problem. Talk about criticism for our front office. That 49ers front office, we both sat here and said they dropped the ball big time, obviously thinking that they could win without Tom Brady. They should have just signed Tom Brady when he was a free agent. Forget about Jimmy Garoppolo. That's what the Patriots did. See, that's the difference between smart organizations, John. Yes, did the Patriots draft Jimmy Garoppolo anticipating Tom Brady would go the route every single quarterback has taken since the dawn of time? Yes, but they realized, John, that it was clearly not Brady's time to retire, so they traded the young Jimmy Garoppolo and stuck with the old Tom Brady, and that's exactly what the 49ers should have done. They should have identified the problem, and it would have been, Garoppolo's nice. He gives us this false sense of security because, he can win some games in the regular season, but when push comes to shove, he doesn't make the plays that you need to make to win consistently. We know Tom Brady does. He was a hometown kid. Go back, 2000. Steve Mariucci, probably he'll tell you, biggest regret of his life. I think he said at one point he'd probably still be coaching the 49ers had he drafted today, this day, which, think about it, John. It's not that crazy of a notion considering Bill Belichick is still with the Patriots today. And, again, it certainly could have been a realistic thing had they drafted the kid that was, throwing footballs not too far at what the greatest high school of all time, John?
Yep.
Yes. That's
Barry Bonds, Lynn Swann, David Bakhtiari all went to the same high school as Tom Brady, all at different times. But, the 49ers have kind of messed up this position before. 2005 draft, they had the first overall pick. They took Alex Smith instead of Aaron Rodgers. I think that would have been a better choice. Rodgers, obviously.
I don't think that was as disastrous as this, though, because, look, Alex Smith.
Oh, no.
Certainly,
they traded up to, yeah. The thing is with this is you can go back to 2017, right? So they had the third pick in the draft. They could have taken Patrick Mahomes, right? If they could have identified him, taken Patrick Mahomes, instead they took an interior defensive lineman. So now they're chasing the position. Garoppolo was good, then he wasn't. And I do also think Kyle Shanahan's opinion of himself is so huge.
Oh,
that
sure.
He doesn't think a quarterback's worthy of his system. But look at what they gave up for Trey Lance, and those players turned out to be Micah Parsons, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and also part of a deal that brought Bradley Chubb to Miami. I mean, they could have just sat tight and at number 12 taken Mac Jones or Micah Parsons. Talk about adding, maybe the best defensive player in football to that great defense. They had all opportunities. Sometimes, as I've often said, sometimes it makes more sense to just play checkers instead of chess.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, stupid. Sometimes those are the best moves.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this is something that, like, if you're a 49ers fan, you're just hoping. You're hoping that they got lucky with Brock Purdy. You're hoping that he is the second coming of Tom Brady. Because if he isn't, I'd be pissed as a 49ers fan. That's the type of front office incompetence that you can be upset about. Taking one player as opposed to another because you like the name, or you know what I mean, he was a popular fan favorite. That's not a reason. Giving up a boatload of picks to give really not give a kid a chance. Yeah, that's a problem, and that's an issue that I think fans certainly should have a issue with, and certainly something that should have John Lynch on the hot seat. So we'll see, though.
Yeah, you remember a decade ago when Denver had this playoff run. They were 8-8, but they beat Pittsburgh, lost to the Patriots with Tim Tebow. He was all the rage. At that point, they said that was nice. We need to upgrade a quarterback. They wouldn't got Peyton Manning.
Yeah,
right. And in 4 years, he goes to the Super Bowl, wins one, wins an MVP. There comes a point where, okay, the guy's limited, whether it's Tebow or Brock Purdy. If you're all in on Brock, they're acting like this guy is an established superstar quarterback. Like, oh yeah, he's our guy. Like, there's no question about it. We're going to trade the guy we drafted third overall 2 years ago. It's like, what has he shown? He had a nice run, right? But do you really go into the season going, yeah, that guy's going to lead us to the Super Bowl?
Well, and look, and in all fairness, obviously they see, just like they see far more Trey Lance than we see, because we only see the games and some practice clips here and there. They've been watching him for 3 years. Same thing with Brock Purdy. Obviously, they've seen a lot more from him outside of just the 7 games that he played last year. But at the same time, do we really trust this front office with quarterback evaluation? So I don't, regardless of if they believe in him or not, like, that doesn't move me. That's the thing. It doesn't move me because I've seen some good out of Brock Purdy, no doubt. But I've seen Ryan Fitzpatrick have 7-8 really, really good games and be an MVP candidate. You know what I mean? 7-8 games doesn't do squat in the NFL to me. That doesn't prove anything. You can sit there and say, like, maybe in hindsight, like, we go back and we look at Tom Brady's rookie season, and there were times, like, and we've talked about it, that game against the Colts, the game against the Chargers. There were some really high pressure, big key moments where he played like a veteran quarterback. I didn't necessarily see that from Brock Purdy. It's not that I didn't see it. It's not that he failed in those situations. We just didn't necessarily see him in those situations too often. And I think that kind of speaks a little bit more to the nature of how offenses are played this year and kind of the way, like, look, I mean, if there's one thing that the 49ers do, they design a great offense and an easy, efficient offense. There's a reason why Jimmy Garoppolo, if you're a hardcore, staunch believer in EPA, was probably the second best quarterback over the last 5 years. Doesn't mean he was, John. Just put it out there. Just saying, EPA is a very flawed metric. But the one thing they can do is design an offense in this day and age, and that's something that makes life a little bit easier for a quarterback. Certainly, ones that may not necessarily have like, here's an example, John. Was the offense that Patrick Mahomes came into the perfect? Absolutely. Perfect play caller, immense amount of talent. But you know what? If he wasn't a great quarterback, teams figure it out. Okay, you can still succeed with mediocre, bad quarterbacks. They can have great games. I mean, we've seen, again, I mean, people are probably falling out of their chair because I'm going out of my way to defend Patrick Mahomes here, but we've seen guys come in and, like, look like Patrick Mahomes. But the point is, they're not going to do that for 17 games. I mean, players in the NFL, like, look, if you're a quarterback, one of the 64 starters or backups in the league, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Nathan Peterman or whoever. you have some talent, and you're likely a lot better than 99% of the people who have ever picked up a football in their life. So, yes, these people, despite their low label as a backup, they're talented. So it means they can succeed to an extent in the NFL. Now, are we seeing that little bit of success from Brock Purdy, or is it a sign of long-term success? I don't know, John. And I think that's, again, if you're the 49ers, especially 49ers fans, you are just hoping that isn't just a flash in the pan and teams don't figure him out, because guess what? They've had a whole off season to figure this kid out when he's coming off a pretty significant injury for a quarterback. So, yeah, a lot of holding their breath in the Bay Area, I'd say, this season.
Yeah, because they have a ready-made team, right? When you look at the rest of their roster, tremendous offensive line, weapons on offense, great defense. They have it all, and now you're putting it in the hands of a second-year quarterback who's limited. I mean, even if you're a huge fan of Brock Purdy, you have to look at him and say, somewhat limited quarterback, right? So, in a lot of those games last year, there were a lot of blowouts. There weren't a lot of close games, and I think against Dallas, he struggled in the divisional round. It's just that Dak Prescott was worse than him, and the 49ers were able to win. Yeah, I mean, if you're going into it with him as your quarterback, I don't think you're the favorite to win the NFC. But then again, who is? Because every team in that conference has question marks, and teams don't tend to repeat as conference champions. So, that would be Philadelphia. But yeah, I think there's a lot of question marks there for that San Francisco team, and it's mostly about the quarterback.
Yep. Yeah. And it's probably going to prevent them from winning Super Bowl. I mean, hell, they signed Tom Brady. They probably have 2 in the last 5 years. So that's just my opinion. So anyways.
Would be true.
Yeah, it would be. Because my opinions are always true, John. Always. Remember
without
that.
question.
Remember that. Anyways, that's going to do it for us here today. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll wrap up August. And again, getting closer and closer to kickoff 1 week from tomorrow. So it's going to be fun. So thank you, everyone, for listening. And we will talk to you then.